Hoyoverse's newest game, Honkai Nexus Anima, is on the horizon, and while everyone is really hyped to see all the new trailers, there is one question that is plaguing the community. Why is Blade here? What is he doing in this game? They straight up plucked him out of Honkai Star Rail and just dropped him in. Look, if we compare his splash art from both games side by side, we can see that the Nexus Anima Blade is exactly the same as Star Rail Blade. Well, except for the fact that his sleeve cuff seems to be gold instead of silver, but that's not even his fault because his in-game model for Star Rail actually has golden cuffs. So the splash art from Nexus Anima Blade is actually more accurate than his Star Rail splash art. So, what is Blade doing here? What role does he play in Nexus Anima? Well, after a lot of scrounging, I still don't have all the answers, but I can at least shed some light on what's going on here. Starting with the official Nexus Anima page, we have a section for some of the characters that we'll be meeting in the game. And thankfully, Blade is one of these entries. Unfortunately, there's only 2 lines of text on the whole entry, but that was enough for me to do some investigating. Let's start not with the first line, but with the second line. It says, one of the Phoenix Breaker Novarchs, he's searching for the 11th Sovereign, which on its own doesn't really tell us a lot, but with some comparisons to the other Sovereign entries and some lore posts from the official Nexus Anima account, I found a pattern that can shine a little more light on this missing 11th Sovereign and Blade as a whole. So, to break it down for you, there was an event called the Sundering that shattered the Nexus, and the Nexus is the connection between all aspects. Aspects are philosophical and scientific concepts, for example, light and dark, chaos and order, love and hate, and so on and so forth. In the old world, before the Sundering, these aspects were paired, and each pair was controlled by a single sovereign. In the new world, after the Sundering, these aspect pairs were broken down into 2 individual planes, and now each plane is controlled by a single Novarch. With this knowledge that each sovereign's aspect is split into 2 Novarch's planes, we can now make some new conclusions. You see, the former first sovereign, Victus, who was the master of order and chaos, is now the second Novarch, the Novarch of order. Take note that he's the second Novarch, not the first Novarch. Instead, the first Novarch would presumably be his counterpart and other half, the Novarch of chaos. Similarly, the former 8th Sovereign, Armand, is now the 17th Novarch, not the 16th. Armand is the Novarch of Dark, and the 16th is instead someone else, Prabhas, the Novarch of Light. This shows us that each Sovereign after the Sundering takes the second number of each Novarch pair, and the first half is someone else. So, the first Sovereign splits into 1 and 2, then becomes Novarch 2, the second Sovereign splits into 3 and 4, then becomes Novarch 4, and so on. As a side note, knowing that there are 81 independent planes means that there were 40 Sovereigns before the Sundering, assuming that this is accurate. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, back to Blade. Blade is the 22nd Novarch and master of the plane known as the Peak. This tells us that the 11th Sovereign that Blade is searching for has to be his other half, the 23rd Novarch. And frankly, that's all we're able to learn about the 11th Sovereign for now. But now we have a new question to answer. What aspect or plane is Blade the owner of? Well, if we look at the splash art for Prabhas, Armand, and Parayaya, we can see that they have a partner anima of sorts that each reflect their plane. For Prabhas, the Novarch of Light, she has this yellow grandpa raccoon looking thing as her partner anima. And in the official in-game footage trailer, one of the boards that we can see is this board with the same grandpa raccoon anima. Take note that there are 9 units and the 9 light aspect active. This confirms that this grandpa raccoon has to be a light anima. For Armand and Parayaya, we don't have any hard confirmation that they're dark and hate aspect respectively, but looking at their color schemes, it's a safe bet that their partner anima are reflections of their planes. So, what about Blade? In his splash art, we can see that his partner anima is a Q-Blade. Also, literally the day that I started writing this script, a new video was released called Q-Blade's Tale, Plane Betwixt Paws, and in this video we can see a bandaged hand, presumably Blade's, picking up the Q-Blade at the end. And if all of this was not enough to convince you, if we go back to the teaser released 4 months ago back in May, we can also see Blade squaring off against Kiana with what is clearly the evolved form of Q-Blade. Finally, if we look at the AnyDex entry for Q-Blade, we can see that its aspect is the aspect of regret. And by extension, we can now confirm that Blade is the Novark of regret, which I find to be very fitting. Now that we know a little bit more about Blade, let's get down to the other question: how did Blade get here? Disclaimer that what I'm about to say next is not going to be a definitive answer and is just an educated guess. So let's start with eliminating theories that don't make sense. Obviously, this Blade can't be Star Rail Blade since Star Rail Blade still has a role to play in his own game. He is also clearly not an XP, as XPs, while similar, are never identical copies. What I think is happening is that after the Sundering, this universe, Nexus Anima, has to place someone that best embodies the other half of an aspect that the previous Sovereign cannot cover. While the Sovereign Novarks are definitely local to the universe, there is a possibility that the other half Novarks are not, Blade being one of them. However, Prabhas's entry shows us that she's already part of the old world, so maybe not all other half Novarks are from other universes. Anyway, that's all the clues that I was able to find for Blade. I'm really excited for Nexus Anima, and this is the first video I've ever made. I intend to make more Nexus Anima content in the future, so if you like this video and want to see more, you can give a like and subscribe so that you can see that new content when it's out. My name is Trills, and I hope you enjoyed your time here.